I welcome you back to track number 3. We will now hear about ESG, environmental sustainability, and environmental, social, and governmental assessment of private companies in contrast to public companies. We've seen in the recent news that there's a lot of debate on what is actually a part of these metrics and what not, and how do we rate the public companies, and is Tesla now sustainable or not, while Exxon seems to be, and Tesla fell out of these metrics. It's a very hot topic that Jerome is presenting to us today, and he's the founder of a startup called Ascentis. Ascentis is based in Delemont, Jura, in Switzerland, and if you want to join his missions, fingers crossed for your InnoSwiss application, and maybe you're part of the story in the future as well. Jerome, we believe the market needs such a solution. You expect governmental regulations around private companies on reporting sustainability-related assessments, and I would love to learn how you use data science to achieve that. So without further ado, welcome, Jerome.
Thank you, Klaus. Can you all hear me? Good. I've never been mic'd up and cabled like that, so this is a new one. So thank you, everybody, and thank you for being here. So yes, we'll talk about ESG and how we tackle the ESG topic. So ESG, as Klaus mentioned, stands for Environmental, Social, and Governance. First of all, I was supposed to be here with my colleague Michela from Subsea, who's not able to attend. And Michela really is the data science and the AI expert. So I've got some notes from her, so I can answer questions to some degree. But after that, I'll take the questions, and if you really want to go deep into how we do it, then it'll be much better to have Michela with us for the more technical ones. But I can still approach overall the ESG topic and what it means, and the challenges from a data perspective and how we've tackled them. So I want to take a step back and explain a bit more our perspective of ESG. There is, as Klaus mentioned, a lot of talk of ESG. Everybody kind of has heard about it, but a lot of people have different perception of what it truly is, and I'll explain kind of at least how we look at it. And then we'll go into the details of actually how we tackle this and our approach for solving. I don't know about solving, but at least trying to break into this ESG data challenge. So ESG for us is a truly a societal topic. I think you've all heard about ESG. This is, to some degree, what it covers, and the list keeps on increasing. So there's new topics that come up. On the governance side, for example, and something that is really important here, the ethical use of AI is something that is coming up in the G side of things. On the social side, yes, diversity, but mental health, for example, with COVID and all that happened, is something that is really coming up. So there's new topics that keep coming. So it's not a static thing, and that's why ESG in a way is kind of everything, because it really is every single topic that concern the environment, the society, and how companies govern themselves. So really broad and expanding. Now the challenge is that companies have to measure and to some degree report on their ESG performance. For large organizations, it's mandatory for them to produce reports. So if you're a listed company, you have to produce what's called non-financial reports. So information around how you're doing for your EUS and the G. But it's more than this, and it actually touches some of the customer that we work for. It's a 50-people services company in Argentina, and they're under pressure to understand, measure, and report on their ESG performance. And that came from their customer. Those guys in Argentina are working for large organizations, and they asked them, so they put the pressure back to their supply chain and say, hey, how are you doing around this? Are you diverse? How are you handling your waste? And they go, well, we're a 50-people company in Argentina. But they ask those questions, and they have to answer those questions. Employees, of course. There's a recent survey that said that 50% here in Switzerland, 50% of the people would not take a job based on the values of the company. So not the salary, not the job description, not the working from home or not, but the overall values of the companies, if they're not aligned to their own values. And this is real. We're really hearing companies that say we need to do this because we're not able to employ the right sort of people at the moment. we talked a bit about the law and regulation. I'll come back to this in a bit because that's the main pressure. Boards, and whether that's a formal board or just some sort of advisory board, but kind of people are really putting pressure on companies to understand. They look at it from a risk perspective. So out of all these different topics, what is the next one that could really bite me? What is the next thing that could make that customers boycott my product or my image really go down because there's one of those things that I've completely missed and it's really hurting me? And competitors. On the environmental, for example, side, if your competitor says, oh, we'll be net neutral in 2025, if you say, well, net 30, or if you don't say anything, suddenly people are going to go, well, what's your plan? You're going to have questions asked. So there's a ton of pressure implied on companies at the moment to understand what they do across all those topics. And what we're trying to tell companies is kind of try and look at it positively, so doing this jujitsu. And yes, it is pressure, so it's kind of, at the moment, it's a bit of, it's more admin, it's more things that I have to try and understand. I don't have the time, I don't have the pressure, why do I have to do all this? And we tell them to look at it as, actually it's all the negative kind of aspects of the pressure are also positive aspects that you should do, basically to be a sustainable business. The bottom line and the financial aspect, of course, like if you're not making money, you don't exist, and that's the end of it as a company. But beyond that, all these things can really impact your bottom line and what you do and how you operate as a company. So from a more formal and kind of mandatory or legal regulatory perspective, in terms of reporting, and I'll take a second as well to talk about the ratings agencies in a bit. So there's different levels of reporting, some mandatory for large organizations. Just literally 3 days ago, the European Commission gave the green light for something called the CSRD, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. And that's going to basically force every company with more than 250 employees, 250, that's not a lot, in Europe, to report on a to-be-determined set of ESG information. So we don't know exactly what it's going to cover. For sure, it's going to be heavily skewed on the E side of things, but it will also have some S and some G data that about 50,000 companies in Europe will have to report on, and that's law. It will be soon. And a lot of companies are not aware of this, but 250 employees, that's not big. And all these companies will have to be legally accountable for that sort of information. There's some discretionary or some other one that's kind of, for example, in the UK, not quite discretionary, but sort of not complete, or even here, for example, there's parity for salaries. There's actually a law that says that you should do certain things and you should report, and large organizations do it. Small organizations don't have to do it, but again, it's good hygiene to do it. And then there's the customers that we prefer, the enlightened ones. The one that go, okay, I'm forced to report on those 3 items. But I actually want to understand what we do across everything. And I want to be transparent, I want to be accountable, and I want to say what we do. And even if we don't do that well, I want to understand what our plan is, and I want to be public about that. So we see a lot of, an increasing number of companies that on their website have some sort of like a trust center or something, kind of a specific section, not just the about us, but a specific section where they actually talk about ESG, what they do, what they don't do that well, and the plans. And that's fantastic. And that's why we kind of would like to get as many companies as possible in that, to do that sort of thing, that sort of transparency. So there are tons of challenges around ESG data. Timeliness. At the moment, if you look at an ESG report from a company, it'll probably be a large listed organization, and it's reporting season at the moment, and that's from 2021 data. So you kind of, June 2022, January 21 is reporting period, so you have data that kind of spans over 18 months. So the timeliness of the data is certainly not real time. The accuracy, it's hard when you look at so many different topics to make sure that it is truly accurate. On the accuracy, for example, there's been some audit done on the net zero plans of banks worldwide, and they all failed. They all suck. Different degrees. Some of them complete bullshit. Some of them just, we don't quite agree with the methodology and they're not quite there. But even large banks that have the money, they have the, they're forced to do it, failed, and even just part of it is not accurate. Consistency, reusability, so that's very important. The CSRD, for example, is asking companies to report not in a pretty kind of marketing communication type, report with pictures and kind of just paragraphs of text, but it probably in something in XBRL or some machine readable format, so that it can then be used and compared and aggregated, etc., etc. But at the moment, it's not the case. Most reports are just marketing kind of communication. Aggregation linked to this, and the assurance. So the assurance is third-party validation of the data, because a lot of that is the company themselves looking at the stuff, trying to kind of see what they do, more or less getting it right, more or less telling the story, and then posting it on their website. That's pretty much, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but it happens. Very few reports are actually assured. So a third party validating, just like on financial reports, validating the data and going, yes, this is 100% accurate. And in a way, assurance is not really possible because of that. How can a company, a third party, come in, look at data that is not, that has all these issues, and put their step on it and say, yes, we 100% guarantee that this is valid? Those guys don't want to go to jail. So the issue overall is not trusted. And that links back to Tesla and Exxon and this whole drama of the ratings, because there's different methods of calculating different things. And so different rating agencies will have different kind of recommendations for the same company. And so overall, at the moment, ESG data is not really trusted. And that has real implications, linking back to the law and the regulations. That was just a few weeks ago before I submitted this presentation. But the Deutsche Bank office got raided because of greenwashing. Just a couple of days ago, maybe more last week now, Goldman Sachs got raided as well, and a couple more. And it's greenwashing at the moment, but we also hear a lot from NGOs about legally fighting in court against pinkwashing, bluewashing, so all other kinds of basically lying from organizations. So everybody is interested, everybody wants to have this ESG data. We want to know how the companies that we work for and we work with do on all these different topics. We are interested as people. As an organization, if you're a big company, and you must know what happens in your supply chain. You must know that there is no slavery in your supply chain. So you need to have the data, but it's very difficult to get. So our mission is to enable ESG reporting at scale while preventing greenwashing and the other kinds of washing. And for us, it's all in the data. The data is somewhere in the organization. It's just not exploited properly at the moment. So for us, really, the ESG reporting, ESG assessment boils down to it's a data question. So when we do the assessment, this is just to kind of present you the end result. We do this for, when I say at scale, our customers are not the big listed companies, it's the rest of the universe. 90% of the companies out there who don't have a head of sustainability, who don't have the manpower, who don't really understand what this covers, like the scope of ESG. And so this is why this looks very practical. So this is the outcome that we give to the C-suite of a 200 people company, or a bit more, but there's KPIs that they can follow and say, you know what, like we'd love it when they use this, and this is something that I present to the board, for example. Very simple, but just 5 things on each of the E, S, and G. And of course, we have all the data behind, so we can then give them all the data and the details. I'll go a bit more into how we do it. So where we're at the moment, we built a prototype and have a whole bunch of learnings from that. We've submitted a InnoSwiss project. I'm assuming you're all familiar with InnoSwiss. Yes. We should actually hear from that next week, but we're, of course, quietly confident. And that InnoSwiss project is working together with SUBSE and BFH. SUBSE on the real technical aspects, so helping us to expand the platform, and BFH on the more, not conceptual, but how do we make sure that the system itself isn't biased? Diversity. How do you really measure diversity? How do you when it's such a diverse topic? Things like tax transparency. What is the right recipe to see whether a company looks like they're not that transparent from a tax perspective? So that's the group that's working on the next iteration. So overall, the process and what we do is very straightforward. From a customer perspective, we want to we want to do it at scale, right? And so it has to be super simple for our customers. And all we ask our customers to do is those two things at the top. So we ask them to provide 10, 15 questions on background information on their company. So how big are they? When were they established? Where they operate, where they sell, who they sell to, that sort of stuff. That gives us information for what we call materiality. So the lens through which we can do the analysis. And the other stuff is we ask them to just upload, just dump on us as much as possible of their corporate documentation. Documents they already have, policies, procedures, they suck the intranet and they throw it over to us, financial data, HR data, training data, anything they have, send it over. A bit like, in a way, this is due diligence, like an M&A due diligence, but with an ESG slant to it. But exactly the same approach. So we collect the data, we do a bunch of validations here, we anonymize the data, both in terms of PI, PID, so personal information, as well as company information, so logos, watermarks, and kind of specific product names, that sort of thing. So we want to be, and we don't want the system to actually kind of know who the company is. We shouldn't care, because we just, analyze the data for all the companies the same way. Servers based here, and then we start, and I'll go back into more detail, but then we start the classification of that, and then the analysis, and then we prepare the report, and then we present the report to the customer. So pretty straightforward. And so again, from a customer, they just sign in, basically give us the information, upload their documents, and at the moment, a few days later, they get this report. We charging a few thousand francs and a few days to get this. To get the same sort of report through consultants, it's at least another 0, sometimes a lot more than that, and month. And with consultant, it's workshops, it's a whole lot of sessions. Everybody says it's quite intrusive. And one of the issues as well with consulting approach is exactly what we want to avoid, is the end report is more based on the conversations that they've had with the management team. So it's more wishful thinking rather than the reality of what actually has, what the data in the documents, in the corpus of information from the company tells us. So our specific data challenges. The first one, and this is actually the main one from a practical standpoint, in terms of how we work with the customers, is the location, the collection, and the sharing of the data linked to the confidentiality and the privacy. Hang on, there's 6 of you in Jura, and you want all my documents. So we have this that we have to work on, and we've got different ways of doing it, so that's why we really insist on the anonymization and a bunch of processes to make sure that they trust us with the data. But even before that, for them to locate those documents, even small organizations, it's all over the place, and you know this. I mean, even if you one-person organization, your information is all over the place. So locating, collecting, and sharing the data is a challenge. And to be fair, it's something that it's probably more than what we expected. As much as when we have the data, we can do the analysis within 2-3 days. Getting the data is often weeks or even months. So we've got this latency, we sign up a client and they're all excited, and then the documents trickle in, and then we have enough to really do the analysis. And so that's, you'll see in the future, but it might be something that kind of on the roadmap, we might need to expand and have more integration with some systems, something more upstream to collect the data. Then we have this volume, diversity, and quality issue. Volume, just because, we suck up the whole intranet, so there's a ton of stuff that we don't really need. Diversity, so there's everything from videos, Excel spreadsheets, PowerPoints, Word documents, PDFs, CSV files, everything that you'd have in an organization. And then the quality, both in terms of the kind of the completeness, or it has, they have, sort of scanned or videos that are really not, that we can't really exploit. And the third aspect is, for us, the accuracy, the relevance, and the completeness. So then how do we make sure that the output, what we provide, is accurate, relevant, and complete? And so those are three very different kind of challenges. This is a technical challenge. When you kind of NLP and those sort of things applying to all these different types of documents, different formats. This is more of an engagement with the customer, but still data. And this is more the output. How do we make sure that it is relevant? Of course, all that with the security and access challenge, because again, we've got some very sensitive data. So yes, we've sanitized it, we've anonymized it, but still, we've got some quite critical data. So for the prototype, how am I doing on time? Oh, for the prototype, we now know the wrong approach. So we said, okay, well, how do we took it from our experience of there's a set of documents that every company has. So we call that, the taxonomy of 200 business documents. There's a balance sheet. There's a anti-bribery policy. So in our mind, we had this 200 discrete, kind of almost standalone documents, and we had that very clearly mapped out. And we said, okay, and so we started training the system to recognize a balance sheet as opposed to some other document that's, in Excel. And so that was the first approach. We then linked to that, we cataloged 2,500 data points, ESG data points. So in a balance sheet, we're interested in those 5 pieces of information. In a policy, we're interested in those 6 ones. So a target, a method, and some sort of, something that would show the result. And then we take all these data points, and these are basically the ingredients. And we have 360 KPIs, and 360 KPIs is like if you imagine this crazy kind of tapas menu, right? So we have 360 tapas, and they're each made of different ingredients that we've collected there. And that really didn't work because we have too many different information within each document type. So that was the first kind of approach. We had those documents, okay, HR data, but then HR data, yes, so you'd of course imagine that we use HR data for diversity, to track diversity, but actually we said, if there's salary information, we can find a whole lot of information that's relevant for the G. If there's an employee address, we can look at commuting, because we have the employee address, we have the office, we know how often they go, we know for this location what's the kind of average commuting method.
We have to slowly wrap up.
Okay. So now we have a different approach. 2 classifiers. We're looking at using BERT and having kind of a ESG BERT type approach. So leveraging BERT so that we can do this sort of thing. So 2 classifiers. 3 big buckets, sub buckets for each of the E, the S, and the G, and then we go to the text and sentence level classifiers. Within each of those documents, we then highlight which one is relevant to each of the KPIs, and then again is done with that's the kind of the human in the loop, but together with the learning. So at this point, we have quite a lot of human expertise saying yes. This is why this was classified as E, and within E, waste. That's it.
So, Jerome, thank you very much for giving us insights. Sorry that I had to cut you off in the end. We have a tight schedule, and please understand. But we still have room for 1 or 2 questions that you guys might have. Any questions? Yes? Wait for the microphone, please.
Well, you mentioned very early on that none of this is approved and reviewed externally. How do you get to the ground truth on whether that waste reduction actually has any impact?
Yeah, so the idea is to have the data lineage, so we can show that the information that we're presenting goes back to this data. Now, the data, like if the company faked the data, the source data, that's kind of falsification, that's cheating. But for assurance, for example, we can, when an assurance company comes in and wants to validate this, okay, you say 50 tons, for example, where does it come from? And they can easily track back to, okay, there's those 3 spreadsheets, as opposed to what happens today is, oof, yeah, we don't know. We have to go back and ask this person who did this, and it takes a few iterations.
One more question, final question, please. The good news is Jerome is around, and now you know what he looks like. You'll find him at the breaks and apéro later.
Yeah. Thanks for your presentation, Luca from Swiss Re. Regarding confidentiality of data and anonymization, How do you overcome a bit the paradox? Because this data should be anonymized before being sent to you, and because I think organizations maybe don't want to send their clear text data to you, and then you assure them you do the anonymization, so they need to do them themselves. But oftentimes they don't have the capabilities of really anonymize or strip of confidential information of these documents. So how do you solve this challenge?
Yeah, so the approach we've taken at the moment is we do the anonymization. So when they upload the data, it goes in a specific folder that we don't have access to. The system looks at and extracts all that. We do have segregation of duty in terms of the person who does the analysis isn't the one who does the anonymization. And then the customer can actually, and then the anonymized data lives in another sanitized folder for that customer, and the data here is deleted. And the customer has access to both until this is deleted, and they can double check here. And this is because we're working for smaller ones. Larger ones, yeah, we'll probably ask them to sign sanitized information, like Siri, for example. But smaller ones, if we ask them to do this, we'll never have it. We'll never have the data.
Okay, thank you very much, Jerome.
Thank you.
This is for you.
Thank you.